Thank you for coming on the programme today. The EU has just slapped additional sanctions on Damascus on Monday. How effective are these measures? Is there a limit to how far they can actually go?
Well, obviously, the situation is going into escalation, and this is the Western will try to impose its will on the Syrian people and on the Syrian government. We can see that the West, led by the United States with the European, given the orders to the Arab Leagues to suspend its membership and to go with the escalation against Syria. The American has lost Iraq after they put trillions of dollars. They know the map of the Middle East is not going into their way. They want to do anything to change regime in Syria, and that's why, with the fear of the Persian Gulf playing a very crucial role, they become the puppet of the United States.
As you say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned all about the American-led West going for regime change in Syria, but with the Arab League turning against Damascus, does that signify a split in the Arab world as well, or has it become perhaps a bit more united?
Well, obviously, when we talk about the Arab League, we're talking about the Persian Gulf country, which actually maintain bases for the American, and they maintain the power of the American in the region. As for the other country, Egypt does not really count because it's going into turmoil, and Algeria, for some reason, wasn't taking a position. And Iraq obviously abstained, but they are against what happened at the Arab League. I think what happened at the Arab League surprised a lot of Arab countries. They didn't want to go very far, but I think Qatar muscled its way through that meeting and imposed the Western will against what is taking place. The order came from the United States when the President of the United States and its administration tell the opposition not to lay down their arms and continue to shoot at the Syrian army. This is a country that actually supposed to respect the international law, telling the opposition to go and shoot at an army and the policemen of the Syrian and to continue
as you say, there are two sides here. Both are armed here. You've got the government forces. You've also got protesters who are, according to some reports, getting weapons funneled across the border from places, for example, like Turkey. But if I may just move on here, Islamist forces. If I may, we're running very, very low on time here. Islamist forces have been able to bolster their positions in post-revolution Tunisia, Egypt, and Libya. How dangerous is that trend, and is it now spreading to Syria?
Well, obviously, Syria is much different than Libya, Tunisia, and the rest of the Arab country. Syria is determined and capable of defending itself, and it has the power and has the alliance with the resistance triangle to continue and defend its territory. It's a miscalculation on the West and on the Arab country to continue that road. It's counterproductive and will backfire, and I think they should recalculate and help the Syrian reconcile its difference and not to instigate more difference between the Syrian.
Now, you do bring up the issue of the West's involvement here. In fact, you brought it up several times repeatedly here. But if I may for a moment, we've had some analysts and reports suggest that the powers in the region, that neighbours to Syria, would also be interested in regime change there. Could there be some sort of power play going on in the region, regardless of the Western influence here?
Well, there is a need for reform in Syria, and the president of Syria said he is up for reform, and he wanted to have reform within his country. Not a change of regime, but modification for the constitution, and I think this is a task President Assad took it upon himself, and that's been accepted and actually been reinforced by a lot of people within his country and in the arena. But here, the other side, I think it doesn't really the Gulf country. They're not looking at democracy because they don't have one, and the United States cannot talk about democracy because their crimes in Iraq and other part of the world still visible. So here here, what we're looking at, the West is interested in maintaining its interest and keeping the balance in check. They lost Iraq. They want to compensate for it in Syria, and that's not new. That's from a long time ago, and now it's actually pushing the Arab to play their dirty role.
All right, live from Beirut, political analyst Kamel Wazne, many thanks.